Good afternoon. You're listening to Gambling with an Edge. Now here are your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Today we're having one of our irregularly scheduled podcasts with a guest who has graced our airways before. We're going to be talking to writer Michael Kaplan, discussing his new book, Advantage Players. Michael Kaplan, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Hi, guys. It's super great to be here.
Now, you've written about a myriad of subjects. A large part of your career has been writing about gamblers and gambling subjects. How did you get started in that field?
It's kind of interesting. What happened was, I grew up, in New Jersey, Jewish kid, hung around people. There definitely was a lot of gambling around me, low stakes gambling. We played nickel and dime poker after school at this kid's house. His last name was Gold. Figures like that's the guy who's hosting the game. And I learned very quickly that the guy who hosts the game usually wins. And he would have like a fake Monopoly board set up in case his mother came in, and he would like drag it across the table. Oh, hi, Mom, we're just playing Monopoly. So I kind of grew up around gambling, selling football tickets and stuff like that. And I always just, was drawn to that world. And I did a few gambling stories over the years. And I did a story about that poker player, Austin Squatty, for GQ. I was like probably the last person to interview Stu Unger before he died for this magazine. Icon was a big, long, involved story, which was amazing. One of my favorite stories that I've ever written, actually. Then I did a story about the Binions when the murder happened, when Teddy Binion got murdered. And soon after that, I got a call from Cigar Aficionado, for whom I was writing some assorted celebrity stories, some stories about cigars. And they said, oh, would you want to do our gambling column? Because their old gambling columnist left. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I never thought that would even be an option. And I did it. And I learned an awful lot. To tell you how much I learned, the very first story I did was about beating blackjack, baccarat, and roulette. And I met with somebody that we all knew who had a roulette system, which is a losing system, trust me. And I didn't know that. And I wrote about it being a way to win. It was not what I would call my finest hour, but that was the start. And then I became friendly with Max, and I got invited to a blackjack ball when I was, this probably would have been, it was when it was still at his house, in the basement of his house. And
wow. That's
there.
his old house.
Yeah. I went there knowing nothing about this world at all. And Richard actually did a cutting demonstration. And he was able to cut to the fifth card, to the sixth card, to whatever card. Everybody's like, ooh, ah. And I knew so little about this world. I'm like, okay, fine. That's like an interesting parlor trick. How could that possibly help you win money? Which I know that's now I know that's not the case. And I lost, when you do when you would have the quiz, I finished worst for the first 2 years in a row. And I got the Jackass trophy. And I heard somebody say, this guy behind my back, obviously, is whispering to somebody else. He goes, this guy's supposed to be some big gambling writer? The fuck? And I was like, yeah, well, I try. And, but I learned. I met a lot of people. In fact, one of the first or second blackjack ball I went to, I met James Grosjean, and he handed me a copy, the old original copy of Beyond Counting. And I took it. I was like, oh, what's this? Of course, it made no sense. I took it home to look at it. I couldn't make heads nor tails out of it. Still a little bit of a challenge. But I started meeting people in that world and learning about the world of advantage play. And it became really fascinating to me.
How did we often ran into the problem of turning up more guests. How did you find it getting people to talk to you for your articles?
I don't know. It's funny. I think maybe by going to the blackjack ball, it gave me a certain credibility. Max has always been an amazing ambassador for me. I wanted to do a story on Rob Wrightson, and I met him at a blackjack ball when I think it was the year that he got player of the year. And I went up to him and talked to him, and he kind of sort of blew me off a little bit, and I think he said to Max, what's with this guy Kaplan? And I think Max said some nice things about me, and then Wrightson called me, said, hey, I'm going to be in New York. Do you want to grab some pizza? And we went to a gluten-free pizza place because he's gluten-free. And we became pals. And I mean, we're like legitimate friends. And I wrote about him. And I don't know. I think being at the blackjack ball helped. Knowing some people helped. I don't know, learning a card count, playing on a card counting team, that probably helped. That gave me some credibility, even though, James Grosjean said, people think, of card counters as, monkeys swinging through the trees, on the evolutionary scale of APs. He goes, they're actually salamanders just crawling out of the water. So I was like, okay, fine. But,
yeah, that is one of his notorious quotes.
I think like little by little, I became, part of this world. I was able to call somebody and say, hey, I want to do a story about you. Would you talk to me? And I think it kind of evolved like that. I mean, I try to be trustworthy, and I honor what I say I'll do. And I think people like that. I actually understand how it works, that I'm not just like some person who's saying, oh, so you're cheating, right? Because that's what people think.
Yeah, often.
So, an advantage player, AP. Now, it's largely a gambling term, although in this book you extend the term to a number of non-gambling situations. How would you define advantage player?
I would say an advantage player is somebody who figures out how to do things that other people can't or won't figure out how to do, and that they're going up against a place or a system or a world or an industry that is difficult to overcome. And they're basically beating the odds, through hustle, not through luck, as somebody said somewhere. And somebody else said when I was writing the book, they outhouse the house. So I think I think it extends beyond gambling. I mean, that's sort of the premise of the book. And I know that to people who are serious advantage players in the gambling world, they might take umbrage with that.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a theme that that I like, that I've often thought about, that there are people in life who are advantage players that have nothing to do with gambling. I was telling you before we started that there's a guy who would have been a perfect fit for your book. You might want to find this guy and interview him sometime. But he's the pudding guy, and he thinks exactly like an advantage player, because what happened was, I believe it was Kraft was doing this promotion with the airlines where for every item you bought, you would get airline miles. And this guy, he valued airline miles at like 2 cents a piece. And he liked this particular soup. And he realized that buying this soup, it was costing him much less because of the airline miles he was getting. So he started going through the grocery store, and he found these 6 packs of pudding that you basically got the miles for every one of the 6. And so it was actually positive EV to buy the pudding. So this guy bought out the entire store and went around to other stores buying all the pudding he could. And then, like a true advantage player, he realized, oh man, cutting out all these UPC codes is going to be a big problem. So he went to the Salvation Army and said, I'll donate all this pudding to you if you get your people to cut out the UPC codes for me. So, he ended up with lifetime free flying, I think, on American Airlines and gold status on United. And then to take it even one step further, because he donated the pudding to the Salvation Army, he got to write it off on his taxes as a charitable donation.
I was about to say, I bet he was able to write it off. That's amazing.
Yeah. And they kind of took this idea. There's an Adam Sandler movie, which the name of it I forget now. I think I can't remember it, but he is the pudding guy in the movie, although it's got nothing. The rest of the movie's got nothing to do.
That's awesome. I wish I knew about that. I would have put him in the book. He would have been perfect.
Yeah.
One of the common definition to AP includes the caveat without cheating or without breaking the law. Is that Now, many of your examples in the book certainly didn't follow that. But do you consider that a key part of being an AP or just not?
I think it's on the fringes of advantage play. And I think you may have said that somewhere in the book. I hope we did. Because I agree with that. I think it's definitely on the fringes of the advantage play world. I mean, I don't know. I think Dustin Marks seemed, I guess like I felt like even though they were cheating and breaking the law, they were doing it in like kind of an innovative way. It wasn't just like, brute force walking in, robbing a bank and putting a gun to somebody's head. There was some finesse to what the APs, quote unquote APs, who did break the law did in the book. So I guess it is an expansion of AP. I will agree with that. But I felt like it's sort of, I don't know, was on the edge of it, I think.
So the original definition, there was a book called The Advantage Player. I think it was called The Advantage Player. And it's from like the late 1800s, I think.
Oh, wow.
And that book, they were talking about people who cheated. They were talking about people who would do anything to gain an advantage at a game. But the more modern definition has really become do it legally. So.
And I mean, I do say, I mean, so maybe the book is somewhat contradictory in a way, because in the introduction, when I describe it, I do say, advantage players do it without cheating. And I say something along the lines of, cheaters go to jail, advantage players, go to the cage and cash out their chips.
Right.
So there is, I do make that delineation. And yeah, I guess that last section of the book does kind of contradict that. But I don't know, maybe I couldn't resist the juiciness of it.
Yeah, I mean, they were interesting stories.
I mean, they may not have been advantage players in the truest sense of the word, but I don't know. I hope the epilogue redeemed me. So
now, you've attended several blackjack balls. At every one of them, there were several dozen players who could accurately be called APs, each of whom are getting the money from the casinos in a slightly different way. Of all those players, you only have time and space to interview a few. How do you pick and choose which ones you believe will have the most compelling stories?
I mean, to a degree, it's the ones that I know about and the ones who will talk to me. I mean, there is a degree of that. Not everybody is game to talk to me. And I do think like it's by snooping around and finding who are the interesting stories. And there's one person who's incredibly interesting who I would love to interview. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen. And I've talked to her about it and she was kind of into it. And then I don't know, it seems now it might not happen for reasons that I'm not sure of, but they have to be game to do it. Number one. And number two, I can't say that I know about every single advantage player, because some of them, they're at the blackjack ball and they're kind of quiet, and I'm not having any contact with them. And I really don't know about all of them. I would imagine that Richard knows about a lot more of them than I do. I mean, I've heard about people doing some things that I found pretty extraordinary that I'm not sure if I should mention or not, that, I have not been able to access those people. I mean, certainly
us too. We have that same, there are certain people on our wish list that we would love to get on this show, but just have never been willing to do.
Well, we should collaborate, maybe. See who we can contact who can swap.
I have to say, I was, really amazed when that was many, many years ago when you got Alan Woods and did Bill Benter talk to you for that?
Oh, yeah. No, well, this was a crazy situation. I mean, I went to Hong Kong for Details magazine to just do like a random story on like Hong Kong horse racing, because I thought it was like this cool scene. And somehow there was a guy I was told was the turf columnist for the Hong Kong, the Hong Kong China Morning Post.
Yeah.
It's the daily paper.
Yeah.
And I go to the racetrack looking for him, and I say, "Oh, I don't even remember this guy's name now." I go, "Oh, so-and-so here." And they all kind of snicker. They go, "Well, he doesn't really come here to report." I'm like, "Oh, do you have a number for him?" They gave me his number and I called him and he goes, "Yeah, you can come by." And I came by And talking to him, and he's explaining to me that he bets and uses computer models. And of course, that was more fascinating than anything else. Then he introduced me to a guy named Rod Duffy, who was incredibly open. He let me come on a racing day. It was his wife or girlfriend and her sister. They were entering all this stuff. It was really cool. And I watched and hung out with him, and we became kind of friendly. And then I found out that the big guys are, Bill and Alan Woods. So I came back. I wrote the story for details, and I pitched to Wired to do, a story on Bill Benter and Alan Woods, and they assigned it to me. And somehow I got the number for Alan Woods, and he would talk to me on the phone, he would, entertain my calling him. And, he talked briefly, go, well, the guy no, I think I got Bill Benter's number originally. And then Bill and Alan had a falling out. He goes, the guy you really need to talk to is Alan Woods. And he gives me Alan's number. And he was Bill was not enthusiastic to talk to me. He gives me Alan's number, and Alan was much more forthcoming to talk to me. And so I was having a bunch of conversations with Bill, off the record conversations. He wasn't really telling me that much. And I'm having, off the record conversations with Alan. And I had a story to do for another magazine in Bali. And I said to Wired, I go, look, I'm in Bali. What would you think about flying me to Hong Kong, putting me up for a few days, and let me try to get this story? I mean, it's speculative. I may not get it. And if I don't get it, I'll have wasted some time, and you'll have wasted some expense money, but we'll call it a day. So I land in Hong Kong, and I call Bill, and I say, oh, it's Michael Kaplan. Guess where I am? And I go, I'm in Hong Kong. I want to come talk to you. He goes, I've got to go. Basically, hung up, right? And I called him back multiple times. I was, no, he's not here. He's not here. And then I called Alan. I go, guess where I am? He goes, Hong Kong. I go, yeah. I go, I want to come talk to you. He goes, and, you know how he would do that, right? And so I go, well, look, I'm all the way here. How about letting me come see you? He's like, okay, fine. And he gives me his address. I went there the next day, and he was awesome. I mean, he gave me his story. I mean, I hung out with Rod again, got some more stuff from him. I think in the end, Bill was trying to get me not to do it, and he let me. I went through the whole story with him, and he said, well, maybe I'll give you some stuff if I know everything in the story. I basically went through, it was basically an elaborate fact check. And he didn't really, in the end, I mean, he kind of got what he wanted. It was a bit of an advantage play on his part. He got what he wanted, and I didn't really get. But I would say when I see him at the blackjack ball, I say hello. He acknowledges me, talks to me a little bit. I mean, I was jealous when Bloomberg Business Week did the big story on Bill Benter. I was like, wow, how did that guy get it? That was kind of annoying to me. But not only did I interview Alan Woods for Wired, but he had me come out again. And, and I got the greatest compliment from Anthony when that Wired story came out. He goes, this story tells the exact way that advantage players earn livings. He loved it. And I was super flattered at the time. I'd be flattered now to hear that from him. And and then Alan and I stayed in touch. I guess Alan liked the Wired story well enough. And he called me once, and he emailed me, and he said, there's a big triple trio coming up. Would you like to come out and be with me when I bet on it? And I go, yeah, of course. And I pitched it to Cigar Aficionado. They put me on a plane and sent me to the Philippines, where Alan was living at the time. Went up to his apartment, and I spent a couple of days with him, and I was with him for the triple trio, which he lost. They lost. They got crushed. And he said, he goes, we've lost about $1 million. He goes, well, if I have to lose $1 million, I'm glad I did it in front of a journalist. So it shows that he loses also. And he took it remarkably well, obviously. I mean, he knows that it happens. And, I think he was legitimately happy that I didn't see him, win a ton of money. And it was great. I thought Alan Woods was an amazing guy. I thought he was really, really cool.
Changed my life.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, it's funny because when I got the idea for Gambling Wizards, I was reading a book on the plane going to Hong Kong to do some work for Bill. And I was reading this book, Market Wizards, that was a collection of interviews with commodities and futures traders. And I was like, gamblers are way more interesting than these people, right? And so when I first got there, the first person I talked to was Bill, and I was like, hey, I have this idea to do this book. And he was like, I can't do it. He goes, but Alan will do it. And he was right. Yeah, Alan was sure. And,
Yeah, he got annoyed at one thing. I sent him the John Bradshaw book, Fast Company.
yeah.
So I thought, he, kind of as a thanks for him being so nice to me. I ordered it from Amazon. I had sent to his address. And I go, how'd you like that book? He goes, oh, those people are awful. Because they're all cheaters. They're all broke. He goes, he was very strict, I guess, about his definition of an advantage. He didn't think any of the people in there were advantage players. So I was like, wow, that's interesting. Yeah, he was like totally. I thought I was like, he's going to say, oh, wow, this is so cool that you sent me this. That definitely was not what he said.
In the section where you discussed Phil Ivey, Phil makes a point that a secret to his success is his humble beginnings. He didn't have money growing up, and he had to win. If he didn't win, he had to resort to sleeping out of doors under bridges. Do you believe that this humble beginnings makes you a better AP theory is something that applies to a lot of people, or just something to Phil?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. Well, I mean, listen, I don't know how much money people who went to MIT had to begin with. I have no idea. And like those guys were obviously great APs. But I think Phil's point was, if you have a lot of money, you don't have to really put in the work, and you could gamble and you could play poker and it could be a fun thing and maybe you'll win a little bit, but you're not like kind of playing for your life. And I think he's right. I mean, I think that, if you're out there playing for your life and if you lose, that you might not be able to pay your rent. And I think that does make you take it more seriously. It does make you really grind, and it would make you find ways of winning that other people might not be able to find, which kind of is a definition of being an advantage player. To me, it's like, finding these ways to do it that other people might not be able to figure out. But I mean, if you were born super rich, also it's so much work. It's not like the easiest life in the world. I don't know that somebody who was born rich, they might think, oh yeah, this is interesting. I don't know they would have it in them like to walk through casinos for hours on end, trying to find the one great dealer, the superstar dealer, as James would call them, who are giving it up. I mean, we're giving up hole cards. And I think that and I learned that when I played on the card counting team. I mean, I really enjoyed it. And I wasn't doing it for a living. So it was not, you know what I mean? And to me, it was fun. I was enjoying it because it was amazing to me, like to be, even tangentially a part of the AP world by being on a card counting team. But, it was definitely work, I mean, it was fun, but it was also work for sure. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that the real work that APs do, like, how hard, I mean, I know James, because I've seen him working on, figuring out games. I mean, to sit in front of a computer as long as he does and to spend as much time, at the casino before the game even happens to kind of get himself set up and to get things going, and then to do what he called cleanup at the end. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of work where you're not really making, the money. You're basically playing like a regular player. And I think having humble beginnings goes a long way, because I just don't think somebody who was born rich would want to do all the hard work that you have to do. I think being an advantage player is a little bit like being a journalist. I mean, I've said to people, I've met like younger people who want to become journalists, and like they'd say, well, how do I do it? And I'm like, listen, if this is not the thing that you want to do more than anything in the world, it's never going to work for you. Like, unless you're the most talented, unless you're like the 1% of 1% who are like that talented, that it's easy. But if you're not in that 1% of 1%, which, you're probably not, you have to like say, oh, I'd rather go out and chase down stories and hang out with my friends. I would rather come up with story ideas than watch a really cool movie on TV. And I think it's the same thing with being an AP. You have to want to do it more than you want to do anything else in life. Like, it has to be a thing that you love doing and you're willing to kind of sacrifice large parts of your life to do it. I mean, people who are on the road endlessly playing in out of the way casinos, places where, not to always quote James, but he's very quotable, as James put it, where the cell phones don't work. You have to be willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do it, you are not going to have much of an AP career, in my opinion. And also, you have to be willing to be thrown out of casinos. That was one of the interesting things. When I was playing on this card counting team, I got thrown off of so many tables. To me, as Bill Benter puts it, if they're not chasing you out, you're doing something wrong. So I said, oh, wow, this is like proof of concept. When I would get backed off from a table, I'd be like, they're not backing me off because they think I'm an idiot. Even though everybody would stare at you like you were the worst person on earth. And there was a guy on the team who said to me, I hate getting backed off. I really try to avoid it because everybody at the table looks at me like I'm a complete degenerate. And I was like, wow, how could you care about that? So I do think you can't be the kind of person who's going to get bothered by being told you got to stop playing. We don't want your business, which I don't know. I don't know that everybody could handle that.
No, you're right. A lot of people can't, and a lot of people can't handle betting large amounts of money. I had a friend that we tried, we taught him, he learned how to count cards, and we tried to use him on a team. And if he put out two hands of $500, his hands would shake.
Okay, so to me, this is going to sound counterintuitive, but one of my proudest moments as a card counter was I was playing at the Palms. I had won a couple grand, and I put in my hour. That was the protocol: play for an hour, no matter win or lose, leave. So I was colored up. I'm ready to go. And this guy sits down, takes out a giant marker. He's got a beautiful woman with him. I'm like, oh, nobody's going to be looking at me. I go, I'll stick around. I'll play one more shoe. Get my, get my lower denomination chips. The count immediately goes through the roof. I'm betting 2 spots of 1,500, getting crushed. I left there with the packs of 10K, those wrappers with 2 wrappers on the table in front of me. And that's all I had left. And I had to, call our guy in Vegas and get more money. And he goes, well, dig your way out. But looking back, there was no way I was going to stop playing or alter the way I was playing, even though I was just incredibly unlucky. The dealer would have, 16 and get a 5. I would have, 11 and get a 5. I mean, it just was one of these horrible, horrible shoes. And the dealer felt bad for me. He even said, maybe you want to just play one hand and change the rhythm of the cards. I'm like, nah, I'm trying to get my money back. And, and I'm sure that, everybody was loving it. The casino was probably loving that I was losing so much and wouldn't stop digging into my money belt, throwing out more cash. And, but in retrospect, that to me was kind of a proud moment because I didn't alter what I did. I played exactly the way I was supposed to play. I made myself be numb to losing that kind of money. That's a lot of money to a guy like me, 20K. And I made myself completely numb to that. And I did exactly what I was supposed to do. Then I got more money, and I don't know that I won it all back, but I definitely played continually as much as I possibly could. I won back as much of it as I could. And I don't know. I thought that was an interesting, at the time, I didn't think of it like that, but in retrospect, I think of that as, that's part of it. Yeah. And I don't know that everybody in the world could do that. No. I would never leave with a positive count. Some people might say, oh man, I'm just unlucky on this shoe. I'm going to stop. I've lost 10K in record time. I'm not going to keep playing.
Well, yeah, most people can't make it. Yeah.
You would get, if I left with a positive count and told the people running the team, they might have thrown me off. I mean, that would be a really, really bad thing to do.
Yeah. One of the things that really surprised me in the book, maybe the thing that surprised me the most, was you, for the first time in the book, revealed that James and his partner, Keith, were behind the whole Don Johnson thing, how did you get allowed to reveal that?
Don told me the whole story. It was interesting. I mean, I knew it. This is the funny thing. Okay, this is how I found that. This is how I got an inkling of it. I was at the Wynn, and I was friends with the guy who owned XS, the nightclub there.
Yeah.
And I was at XS, and I was sitting at Victor Dre's table, and pretty good table. He was one of the co-owners, or managing partners. It was a pretty good table to be sitting at. Victor's there. He's getting, lots of booze. There are all these attractive women, blah, blah, blah. And then walks over Keith, and I think we had met once or twice, and he goes, "Hey," he goes, "We're one table ahead of you." Right? I looked over and I see James, and I didn't know Don. I don't think I even knew who Don was at the time. And I see they're sitting at his table. They've also got a bunch of, interesting people there. And, I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And we're talking a little bit, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out that there's a big party in Don's villa after. So I followed them out. There were a couple of people from my table who were going to the party, so I kind of glommed onto them. And we're following the crowd to Don's, fleet of cars to go back to his villa. And I'm there. And then the guy that they call Big G, he says to me, "Oh no, you can't go." He I think he took my arm and basically ushered me away and said, "Yeah, you can't come." I go, "Why?" He goes, "Yeah, we got too many people." I'm like, "Really?" I go, "I'm friends with two of the guys that are going." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You can't go." I later found out from Keith, I told Big G not to let you go. They didn't really want a reporter at the party. I guess I wasn't that trusted at that point. I wasn't that tested. And, Don goes, "Oh, you could have come." I'm like, "Well, not really."
Yeah. Yeah.
And,
Well, Don wouldn't have been the one objecting, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I kind of knew, but I knew that they were playing together, obviously. And I think that James at one point told me the story about how they met, which is in the book, about how they met, and that Keith went over there and, as James put it, go there with pockets empty, because they didn't know anything about Don at the time. They didn't know he was who he was. And I was fascinated by it all. And then I think I was talking to Don and saying, "Oh, we should maybe do a book together." And he's like, "Yeah, that would be okay." And then I came out to see him in where he lives, and went to his house. We hung out for a few hours. I went to the movies with him and his kids, one of his kids' friends. And then we went back and finished talking. I think he made plans to go to the movies, so we did the movie break. And then we went back and finished talking. And he told me a lot of stuff, and I was like, wow. And then I became friendly, relatively, friendly with Don. And I never really wrote it up, because I think we were going to do a book, and then I don't know, I couldn't really figure out what the book would be. And I don't know. I never wrote the proposal. I was interviewing him, hoping I would write a proposal. Then it could be, by him with me, like his story of how I won, X amount of dollars. It never happened, but I had all the recordings. I had the interviews, and I think I used a couple little bits and pieces of it somewhere. But when I was going to do the book, I called him and said, "Would it be okay if I used that?" And he goes, "Yeah." And so then I wrote it up, and as a courtesy, because I know you don't really talk to people about this. So I went through the whole chapter with him from beginning to end, and he wanted me to change a couple little things, which I changed. I don't know. It was interesting that he was willing to reveal all that, but he was comfortable with it.
Well, I'm sure he was, but I'm not sure how comfortable Keith and James were with it. But I haven't asked them, so I don't know.
They've seen it. They've seen the book. They've seen everything they've seen the whole book. So,
yeah,
I guess they're comfortable.
Yeah.
Did James say anything to you?
No, he didn't. He didn't.
And he would if he wasn't, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, but and again, it wouldn't be with you. It would be with Don that they'd be upset if they were going to be right.
Yeah, I think he was cool with it, and and James gave me incredible access when I did the story for the Times magazine. I mean, that was insane access that he gave me. And then he had me come on and BP for him after the story came out. And that was wild access. I mean, it wasn't like, "Oh yeah, we want you to come write about it," but it was, that was incredible. Yeah. So my getting to actually play with James, that was an unbelievable experience. I mean, because basically my advantage playing up to that point was limited to card counting, doing some hole carding, but playing with James was really a real experience. I mean, I don't know, that was amazing. And listen, that underscores what we were talking about before. He's got as great a work ethic as anybody I've ever met. I mean, he'd be up all night running numbers on his computer. You wake up, he goes, "Oh, we could shave off 0.1% if we do this." And I'd be like, wow, it just, I don't know. And it was amazing, how hard he worked and how generous he was with the other people in on the play. Because it's not like he said, oh, this is my play. I'm giving you X amount of dollars per hour. Like everybody was a partner on the play, which I found to be extraordinary and really, really smart on James's part.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not greedy. He's not. And
Not
his
greedy.
work ethic, I mean, he'll go out and play 16 hours a day, get back to the hotel room and then program for, 6 or 8 hours while everybody else sleeps.
Well, yeah. Well, that was the funny thing. When I was there, we were like staying in this like quote unquote cabin together, and everybody was angling to get their own bedroom. And James was happy to sleep on the couch because there was a giant TV. He had the TV playing movies all night. He'd sleep for a few minutes, then get up and do more coding, watch the movie, fall asleep, get up, do more coding. So he wasn't really even getting a full night's sleep, it seemed, ever, which again, I found that extraordinary considering, it's a big responsibility what he was doing.
He told me recently he was somewhere and in a large casino and basically he had logged 33,000 steps that day in the casino.
Like looking for dealers.
Yeah.
5 years ago or so, I got to sit with Edward Thorpe and his family at the blackjack ball, really by accident. But I had a nice long chat. While I held it together, inside I was pretty giddy from being able to spend time with one of my heroes. James Grosjean and Phil Ivey are kind of AP royalty. When you interview such people, do you get giddy?
I don't know. I try to be really focused on what I'm doing and that I'm going to get my story. But yeah, there definitely is a degree of that. I mean, with Ivey, it was a little bit different because it was the time was really stilted. I mean, I think that he thought I was going to just come and interview him and leave, and that's not what I was promised. And I wound up I think I was there for like 10 days for Playboy, and I would sort of hang out with him. Then I would call him and not hang out with him for a couple days. I'd hang out with him for a day. So it was stretched out. So it was a little bit too stressful for me to be very giddy. I would say the first time I interviewed him, I had that feeling. So I did a story on him for Cigar Aficionado, and it was like that was what it was. I mean, I met him at in his suite at the at Aria, and I hung out with him there, and it was it was just him and I sitting down, and there was that sense. I mean, yeah, you're with like a guy who's like the best of the best in that world. And it really did feel that way. I mean, I felt that way a little bit, to be honest with you, with Alan Woods. I mean, when I was with him, there was like this set when I interviewed him for, I guess probably for the Cigar Aficionado story more than for Wire, because the Wire story also was like one of these tense stories. I didn't know when he was going to end it, when he was going to kick me out. It wasn't like 100% comfortable. When I went for the Cigar Aficionado story, I was kind of like an invited guest. And there was that sense of giddiness. And I mean, I watched him swimming up on his roof, waited for him to come down. And the great thing was we sent a photographer there and he's doing all this stuff. He had a pool table in his living room and he's like doing all stuff around. He's shooting pool. He's like doing all stuff. I go, I've got a great idea. Why don't we get some Filipino money? You could set it on fire. He goes, yeah, I'm not doing that. He wasn't willing to set money on fire for the story. There was a great story about Ted Binion when I was doing the story about him for I wrote about him for Los Angeles magazine, after he was murdered, and somebody told me that he would go to strip clubs and if he wasn't getting attention, he'd take $100 bills, start lighting them on fire and hold them up over his head till somebody came over and said, "Stop burning that money, we'll take it."
One of the people in your book got included as an AP because he was hung like a horse. I found myself wondering how being well endowed qualified one to be an AP.
Well, okay. So my thinking was he took a thing that he had, and admittedly, he was born with that. But, you could argue that some people are born really mathematically astute and, it comes easier to them than others. But I felt like he kind of decided to use that to make more money at a pursuit than he could have made. He was working as a stockbroker. I mean, I'm sure he was making pretty good money as a stockbroker, and he realized that he could make more money in porn. And I guess I viewed that as, the ultimate tool, let's say. And he was going to, I don't know. In my opinion, I think it is kind of an advantage play to take this thing that you have and to use it in the most profitable way possible. I mean, it'd be like if somebody was really, really good at math. I mean, they could be somebody who, I don't know what they would do instead of, you know, a casino AP, but they could do something just, I don't know, maybe they would play a lot of chess. Somebody who's really good at strategizing and they would spend hours and hours playing chess and not really capitalize on it, but they would use it instead. They would apply it to either beating poker or figuring out ways to beat casino games, like in a weird way. And I know this might be a little bit of a stretch, but in a weird way, you could argue that Lexington Steele did that with his large appendage.
Okay, now I'm confused, Michael. A few minutes ago, we agreed that the APs are the smartest people in the room, the hardest working, and really exceptional intelligence-wise. And now you're implying that everybody can be an AP. Those are two different sets of people. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're the smartest people in the room. They're also the most observant people in the room, the hardest working people in the room, and the people who are best at applying their intelligence towards something. I mean, I do think that's another AP quality, is figuring out what you could apply your intelligence to. I mean, I'm not trying to say, oh, I'm like, the James Grosjean of journalism or something, but like, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I did realize that like I have a skill like for writing. I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at getting information. I'm good at figuring out how to make that into a story. So that is like a little bit of an AP move. I think there is an element of being able to take this skill or this intelligence or this, I don't know, maybe born ability that you have and knowing how to apply it to a certain pursuit.
Yeah, once you have the AP mindset, then you see the world in a different way, even if it's just figuring out how to best unload the dishwasher. You're going to think about doing it the most efficient way.
Yeah, there's a great story about that. Sidney Lumet's daughter, the director, was talking about her father and it was an actor hanging out and having like an hour-long discussion about the best way to load and unload a dishwasher, the most efficient way to do it. And I was like, that is a total AP move. Like it's the exact thing you're saying. And I think that people who are APs want to do everything in the most efficient way possible, in the smartest way. I mean, I was talking to a poker player who said like, if you drive 55 miles an hour instead of 65 miles an hour, the likelihood of you getting into an accident is reduced by X%, and you're giving up X% in the time it takes to get there. It's a better deal to spend the extra time. I mean, it sounds obvious, but you also have to have it in you to do that. I mean, most people would be like, oh, I'm going 55. Well, why is everybody passing me? Oh, I'm going to go 70. But if you're an AP, you might have thought that through and said, I don't really care. That's the other thing, is like not really caring about how other people do things, that you want to do things in the right way, the most efficient way, the most advantageous way, the way that gives you EV at whatever you're doing.
So another person that usually does not want to talk about what they do is Eddie Teams, and you somehow managed to get him to talk to you too.
I met him when I was doing the story for the Sunday Times magazine, and I interviewed him for that. So I first met Eddie Teams in a strange way. So when I was card counting, one of the things I learned was tournament strategy, because sometimes we would get invited to play in these free roll tournaments. And somebody I know knew that, and he paid for me to get into a tournament at Treasure Island. He put up the money for me to enter, and if I won, we were going to chop the money. So I was there playing, and I advanced a couple levels. I wound up not making the money. I came pretty close, but I wound up not making the money. It's unfortunate. But I advanced, I think, 1 or 2 levels, and there was a break, and I went with the guy who put me up. We went to breakfast, and there were a couple other players at the breakfast, and Eddie was there. And Stanford Wong is there, and Eddie's got Stanford Wong's tournament blackjack book with him, and there are all these Post-it notes sticking out. And I'm like, to myself, like, this goofball, he brought the book to the tournament and he's going to like try to get Stanford Wong to sign it or something. I just like, it's weird. I was like, who is this guy? And we sit down, and the guy who put me up, he whispers to me, he goes, that guy is the sharpest of the sharp, meaning Eddie. And I'm like, okay, right. And then he starts talking about what happened while he was playing. And he's talking about things that I 100% do not even understand what he's talking about happened to him and how he handled it and what he did. I'm like, okay, this guy's obviously, a few planets above me in no tournament play. And I sort of said, okay, I probably shouldn't judge a guy by carrying this book. And I later found out he's got a library full of books loaded with post-it notes. And he's like, does insane research for everything he's interested in. And when I was doing the Sunday Times Magazine story, I was hoping to meet Kelly. And I reached out to this guy who put me into the tournament and said, do you know anybody who would know Kelly's son? Because I didn't know. It was clear that what the play she did with Ivey was known, but I didn't know her. I didn't know, I just knew what was in the newspapers. He put me in touch with Eddie. I went and met with Eddie, and I was asking him a bunch of questions about Kelly. And he goes, you want to just meet her? And I was like, yeah. And we went, and I met her at, which casino was it? I don't know, some casino at the bottom of the strip where she was playing Baccarat. And we hit it off and we talked. She gave me some pretty good quotes from my story, and the story came out, and, she liked it. And then I said, what do you think about just doing a story on you? And she was like, okay. I came out and did it, and we did the story, and that went really well. And it wound up getting optioned for a movie, and I wound up doing a story on Eddie himself. Yeah, I did a story on Eddie Teams, and that's in the book. I think Eddie's a fascinating guy. He's a guy who's really, really smart and, really knows what he's doing, obviously.
Michael, we want to thank you for joining us today. This has been a very fascinating episode. And so for our audience, for people who want to find your book, where can they find it?
Oh, yeah, you can find it on Amazon.com, or you could order it directly from Huntington Press, which I'm sure Anthony would like. But either way, it's a great book, and Amazon is an easy place to get it, as is Huntington Press. You can get it from either place, and I hope people order it. What I would hope is that people will read this book and and realize that that everybody could be an advantage player. That there's advantage play in almost everybody. That you could find your area where advantage play makes sense, and where you could be an advantage player in your dominion, which is a term that we use in the book that Deke came up with, not me. And that's a, I think I would hope that this will inspire people to find their kind of inner advantage player and, use that to be more successful and live a better life and do more interesting things, more efficient, make more money, have more fun, whatever reward it is that you want, you could get by being an advantage player in some area, whether it's coaching Little League baseball or, I don't know, racing motorcycles or fixing your car or anything, or emptying your dishwasher. I mean, there will be an advantage play thing that you can do in life, and it will make your life better.
Michael, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
They could do it. I mean, I have a website, and I have my email is michael@advantageplayersbook.com. And that would be a great way to reach me.
Okay, well, we will put a link to that in the show notes. And of course, we will put a link to the book as well. So Michael, thank you very much for being with us today.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, Bob's connection seems to have dropped out. So go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good day.